The first Battlefield product, I believe, was around 2000, the year 2000 with Battlefield 1942. They had a couple products before that that led into it, but that was really the first big one. It's developed at a company called DICE in Sweden, which EA eventually ended up purchasing. So they've been making these Battlefield games for a long time now. It's been, 2000, as I said, was probably 2001 maybe. I can't remember exactly, but it's been a long time. They kind of hit on a formula that has really resonated with people, and I'll talk about it and what's involved in it, sort of informing what kind of work goes into it, what kind of careers, all that. So it's heavily focused on team play. You have two teams that are battling on a battlefield. They use vehicles. The environment is destructible. It's just a big war between two sides. One of the things we talk about is the sandbox nature of it. The cars, the trucks, the explosives, everything you have on the battlefield, people are sort of free to play with them and kind of make their own moments. So you may have seen, if not, you can search for it on YouTube. There are things called Only in Battlefield Moments, which people put together montages of crazy things that they've managed to accomplish, using C4 to flip a tank on the roof of a building, or any kind of crazy thing that they come up with, flying planes upside down under bridges, whatever. And that nature of it being kind of a playground where the laws of physics are represented to some degree and you can play with them has been a big part of the franchise. So the game that we're making now is the next one in the series. It's called Battlefield Hardline. It's the first one to go out of a military setting into a more urban setting. So this one is going to be focusing on cops and criminals, and there is a kind of larger than usual maybe focus on single player story, because it's being developed here at Visceral Games. It's the first title that wasn't developed at DICE in the Battlefield series. We have a history here. We made all of the Dead Space games previously to this, among other things. So we have a history of working on single player games and focusing on story and that kind of thing. So we are bringing a bit of our experience with a crime revenge story into Battlefield, at the same time as preserving all of the multiplayer stuff and adding new modes and vehicles and all of that for a multiplayer experience as well. So we are working with people all over the world. Part of working in AAA video games is that the teams are huge. There are hundreds of people, and the development is worldwide. We have people in China, in Canada, in Australia, in the UK, in Sweden, in Los Angeles. I think that's most of them. So different things are done at different places, being coordinated here locally at Redwood Shores, right up the street. So I'm going to show you a couple videos now. The first one is a single player trailer. Yeah, Omaha was actually our code name for the game internally before it had been released. So that focused more on the single player aspects of the game. You can see there some of what we were talking about in terms of storytelling, the actors and all that kind of stuff, which I'll talk about more. The next trailer is multiplayer footage.
Sure, why not? Pretty quiet day so far.
Breaking news. A heist is underway in downtown Los Angeles. The target? Armored trucks. Sky 5 News is reporting live from the increasingly chaotic.
Gentlemen, let's get cracking. We got a heist in full.
the interesting to think about there, yeah, it's cool and all, but you got to see quite a lot there of what the worlds are like, the destruction, the vehicles, all that kind of thing. To talk about what goes into making that, when you start thinking of the fact that all of those buildings were built by people, painted by people, all of the animations of the building falling apart by cars, etc. All of that stuff, people were doing all of that. You can see some of what I'll be talking about now. What our team is like. So there are literally hundreds of developers. We have hundreds here. There are more around the world. Probably the majority of that is artists. So all of that ground that you saw, all of the street, all of the buildings, all of the people, everything gets built by an artist, painted by an artist, animated by an artist. So the amount of artwork in a game like this is huge. So there's also quite a lot of programming. So the first clip that you saw was single player, just a teaser for single player. And then the second was multiplayer, but if you look at all what's involved in the multiplayer side, there are servers, there is matchmaking, there is all of that kind of stuff on top of all the game systems and the physics and dealing with, your Xbox friends list and all of that kind of stuff. So it's a giant, giant thing that lots of people work on. We have lots of support all across the whole EA organization, so there are a lot of groups that work with us on testing, on tracking telemetry, on any number of things, dealing with the first party, dealing with Sony and Microsoft. So I'm going to talk some about game team jobs, but there are more jobs at Electronic Arts and more careers at Electronic Arts than just specifically on game teams. There is a lot now as well, focusing on big data kind of stuff, the same kind of things you would see at more database-oriented companies and things like that, tracking information about how people did what and that we can use to improve the games, that we can use to know how people are playing, et cetera, et cetera. So primarily what you think of on the classic game team though, the dev team, there are really kind of four disciplines. There's design, art, engineering, and management. A lot falls within each of those. So design is pretty broad. Design goes from the people that decide what the concept of the game is, decide what the rules of the game are, into people that say a shotgun does more damage than a pistol, the amount of health you have is X, a shotgun does Y, a pistol does Z. There are also a lot of designers that actually build stuff. So the way a lot of these games work now, a lot of the content is scripted by designers. So you have a game engine that is written by engineers, but designers actually do a lot of programming work effectively themselves too. They just do it in visual language. They're basically triggering events. They're like when you saw that crane fall over, for example. I didn't really show it in the video, but there are 4 wires that tether the crane, and so as people destroy them throughout the level, eventually when all of them are broken, the crane falls over and plays all that animation and does all of that stuff. But a level designer is the one that's setting up all the logic that says these 3 wires trigger playing this animation and make this event happen and all of that as well. So there are sort of technical jobs within the world of design. A lot of that part of design is actually programming, just in a visual language. In art, there's lots of kinds of art. Primarily, we have people that make characters, animate characters, make the environment that you see, make vehicles that you see. There are a lot of people that paint textures. In the new world, a lot of what you see is driven by lighting too. So the algorithms that are used to draw those scenes, the way the lighting is, people actually are placing lights around in the world, adjusting their parameters. Part of what we did for this particular game is to go with something called physical rendering, which is basically trying to make the rendering work like it does in the real world. So we model the properties of a surface like a wall accurately, and then if a light strikes it, it reacts accurately like it would in the real world. So that puts a lot of control of how the scene looks in the hands of the lighters, because there's no light when you start. Engineering, there's a bunch of different types of engineering involved as well. We have people that work on the game engine itself, people that do things like, if you think about what we saw there was a rendering simulation, we're drawing the scene. There's a physics simulation, all that stuff is moving, bouncing around, when it exploded. bullets were firing across the projectile, seeing if it hit something. So there's a lot of that technical kind of stuff. There's gameplay engineering too, a lot of stuff in terms of the player's abilities, the guy using the zip line that you saw riding down, somebody trying to ride code that drives on behavior, all of those kinds of things. Then, some of the other kinds of engineering that aren't directly on our team, I mentioned before, and they get into our team as well a bit, dealing with working with the first parties, working with the systems to have cross-game invites, and so if somebody's playing one game, they get an invite, they can join another game, all of that kind of stuff. Dealing with our own online backend, EA has its own account system, achievement system, matchmaking, all of that, working with all of that, so there's quite a bit there. And then there's management as well. For these huge teams with hundreds of people, you need managers, you need technical managers. My job as one of the leads on the team, going as an engineer, I do spend a lot of my time doing management stuff as well now, because when you have lots of people, somebody needs to make sure they're all working on the right stuff and not duplicating effort, those kinds of things. So this is mentioning some of the bigger outside of our team kind of stuff. So automated testing is a big thing now, trying to find ways that you can use computer programs to test the computer programs instead of having humans test the computer programs. So we still have a large human test department as well, but there's a big focus on things like every map in the game being booted by a computer to check that it doesn't crash, things like that. So there's a big effort on that. Operations, like I was mentioning, we have large, very large organization that tracks telemetry, measures how people are playing the game if they opt into it and do so. All of that kind of stuff does our matchmaking for a game like Battlefield. It has dedicated servers, so when you're playing multiplayer in Battlefield, there is a server instance somewhere in the world that is running a server program that's connecting to managing all of those when they're spawned, all that kind of stuff. And of course, we have marketing and public relations partners and all that kind of stuff as well. Sales, all that kind of stuff. So it's kind of what is this sort of a common feature here that's not just for our team. So most AAA development across the industry sort of shares some of these things. The scope is really big. So you're building huge games that cover lots of ground. Oftentimes they have a lot of play modes. It's a lot of work, basically. And the team sizes are huge. You can see in the news these days, it always seems like there's some news story about the new biggest team, whether it's Assassin's Creed or whoever. People are up into hundreds and hundreds of people working on these games, and most of that is driven by how much space they have and how much ground there is, as well as breadth of modes and all that kind of stuff. So, like I said, I worked at small companies, startup companies, and companies like this. And so these last two kind of talk about one of the differences between them. A lot of people will ask, which is better? Is it better to work for a startup? Is it better to work for a medium-sized company? Is it better to work for a giant company? And they all have pluses and minuses. So these are pluses, basically, for a giant company. People have focused roles. If you're working as part of a 3-person team making a game like Minecraft or something, you are going to touch a lot. You might do graphics and audio and physics, and some other guy might do UI, but because there are so few of you, you get your hands into a lot. A big team like this, people have more focused roles. We have experts in rendering, we have experts in physics, we have experts in networking. So those people, you get a chance to work with people who are truly experts in their field. So we have rendering engineers that give talks at SIGGRAPH. You really get a chance to be exposed to pushing the state-of-the-art forward more in a big company like this, where in some of the smaller companies, it's another way around. It's also cool to be able to touch lots of parts of the game and feel like you own so much of it. So I always say there's not small, medium, or large. It's not really the one's better than the other. They're just different. So those are some of the features and what's good for that. So here is a little bit of advice about getting into the industry. So I've been doing this for a long time. One of the things that I've done for most of the time that I've been doing this is interviews and been dealing with people getting into the industry. So I've seen many resumes and interviewed many people. So I can talk to you about what I've seen that I like to see and others do as well. So for school, really you want to go to the best school that you can. One thing that a lot of people think now, there are some programs that's starting to get to be where there are game development majors and things like that. That's nice, but it's not as important as going to a good school. So you basically, you want a strong background from a strong school, and I wouldn't be too worried about like, well, this one has game development as a major, and this one just has computer science, but I think that school is better. Go with a better school. Most of what you learn for games, you're going to learn on the job anyway. I'll go a little bit more into that as well, but you want to pick the best school that you can. Don't get hung up on whether or not they have a game design program. So computer science is the most natural for all of the engineering jobs, the technical level design jobs, some of those kind of things. The games industry is a little unique in that it's not completely required that a person have a computer science degree. Like I don't, my degrees are in mechanical engineering. So my coworkers have degrees in physics and math. It's harder though, right? Like the real truth of it is, if you really want to go into games and you're really seeking that, computer science is the natural path. You'll have an easier road in that way. You will have internships and things like that. The companies reach out to schools in the CS programs where it's math or something like that. So that's just something to balance. Computer science is the most natural. You probably want to stick mostly to hard sciences, though. It would be difficult to get a programming degree in history or something that is not so technical. So this is a little bit of advice about, say you are at school. This is something you can start now to some degree before. You don't have to wait for college to start on this stuff. But one of the things that we run into in games is we are programming for specific pieces of hardware. So you have an Xbox One or a PS4 or whatever. We interact directly with the rendering hardware, the audio hardware. They have special chips in them that like decode movies and things like that. So it's a very hardware-focused kind of software engineering. In many cases now, some of the coursework that you get is focused around virtual machines, things like Java, things that abstract away from you the details of the hardware. So in games, hardware is important. And you want to, it may be that these are electives that you need to take, because in some cases they may not be part of the core curriculum. But C++ is important. C++ is the language that almost everything is done in games. So some of the tools are in C# and other languages today, but the heart of the runtime code of almost, I don't know, any major game engine that doesn't use C++. In some cases, C++ is an elective class, but it's obviously extremely important if you try to get a job in the game industry. Your interview is going to consist of people asking you questions about C++ and things like that, so you definitely need that. Like I said, a hardware focus, so any coursework, even assembly, is kind of the ultimate opposite of a language like Java. Assembly language, actually working with the hardware directly, courses like that help. A big thing currently is concurrent programming. So the Xbox One and the PS4, and to some extent the older ones as well, they have multiple processors in them. So there are 3 CPUs or 6 CPUs or whatever it may be in these different boxes. You have to write your code to work well with multiple CPUs. That's very difficult, and it is not something that is necessarily standard coursework. A lot of times you might just be thinking about one thread of execution, or you might only touch on multiple threads a bit. it's critical for these game machines that exist now that you master the ability to have code that runs on multiple CPUs at the same time, talks to each other, and shares work, and all of that. So that's a very good course to look at as well. So for math and physics, if you think back to those videos, a lot of what we saw was a physics simulation. So the way the cars work, the way the tires work, the way things fly through the air, the way things react to explosions, all that kind of stuff is driven by physics, and math ultimately being solved behind the scenes by the physics. All the 3D stuff relies on math, all the lighting relies on math. So the thing is though, you don't actually need super deep math and physics. You want basically linear algebra and vector calculus at the first level is pretty critical. But beyond that, if you like math, then don't stop taking it. But that level of math is very important. You need to be familiar with manipulating objects in 3D space. And then physics, again, it's the same thing. You don't need to be doing quantum mechanics, but the basic understanding of the equations of motion, how things move, how things react to impulses and moments of inertia, forces and acceleration, and that kind of thing. Really though, again, that could be a class. So you're really looking at there 2 math classes and 1 physics class, but having those will put you ahead of other people that are applying for a game job that have purely a computer science mindset. So in terms of applying, first talking about a place like EA, EA is huge, so lots of people want to work at EA, and EA gets tons and tons of applications for jobs. It's very difficult to sort of cold mail your resume to EA and even be considered for a job, just because, I've seen folks that fake their resumes and things. So what you really want, if you're interested starting at a place like EA, is to look at internship programs. The majority of the sort of entry-level hires that we make come through internship programs. So while you're in school, you'll have an opportunity to look at those kind of things. And it really is the best way for a big company. And for us, for example, a lot of times when you go to work for an internship, the company's interested in keeping you around. You're there, and they're looking, they're sort of, it's an on-the-job interview in a way, and they're looking to take you back if you do well. So that's the easiest way in. Something else that's important is to make something when you don't have history. A big thing in the games industry is how many shipped titles you have on your resume. Well, if you're starting out, you have 0, obviously. So you can still make something though, programming something in your free time, programming it for school, making a game, making a mod for a game, something like that, just to have something that's somewhat involved in detail that you've made, that when you go to an interview, somebody can say, well, hey, tell me about something cool that you programmed. You can say, well, here, I made this game, let me show you, or let me tell you about it. And I'll start asking, well, how do you do this, well, how do you do that? You'll have the kind of knowledge to answer those questions if you make something, if you want to actually build something. A lot of school programs, it'll just come naturally, but if you're really into games, making a game on the side or something isn't too good to do that too. Another thing that's important is loving what you do. Another thing that's somewhat unique in game interviews as well is people will ask you a lot of times, do you play games? What's your favorite game? So it helps to know the material. They're looking for people that love what they do, who would be, in some ways the ideal candidate is somebody that would do it for fun, even if it wasn't their job, because they're really going to give you everything at that point. So be prepared for those kind of questions, and when somebody says, hey, do you like games, what's your favorite game? It's not a great answer to be like, oh, well, I don't really like games, like I don't find that fun to play them or something. That doesn't really go over. They're looking for people that make time to work on. So really, that's about it. I'm happy to answer whatever questions you might have about any of these subjects. So I'm going to start over here at one topic. When is the game coming out? So we recently actually delayed it. It was due to come out, I think October 24th, I think was our original ship date. It's going to come out early next year. We had a beta, a few weeks back we had a beta, and we got a lot of valuable feedback from the community and people who partook in the beta. And we actually did what, in my opinion, is a great thing. And it actually kind of shows the EA is getting better and looking forward at something. They actually are taking the time to actually move the ship date to react to some of the feedback that they got from the community because they thought the feedback was so good. So it'll be early next year. The exact date isn't set yet, but sometime in the first year.
My name is Timson from Maryland, and I have two questions. My first question is, do you play video games? And if you do, what is your favorite system?
Oh, so I do play video games. I play video games a lot. So as for favorite system, it's tough to say. I have all of them. I probably spend most of the time playing on PC actually.
Yeah.
So, and as for games that I play all kinds of games. I play shooters, I play MMOs, I play a lot of lately. I've been playing Diablo. I've been playing. I just tried to test the new beta. So all kinds of things. But I'm a big game player.
I wanted to ask, do you have any internship opportunities for high school students?
Actually, I don't know. So if you come up and talk to me afterward, I'll give you my email address and you can mail me. I don't know. I've not seen it personally. All the ones that I've seen have been for college kids, but I don't know, and I'll find out for you. I can put you in touch with somebody that can let you know.
Hi, I'm David from South Africa.
Yep.
I just want to know how long would it, like on average, would it take to program a game like this?
So it varies. Most game cycles are 2 to 3 years. So it does, obviously you're not furiously writing code the whole time, but a lot of the time is making the art and things, and a lot of what you're actually doing is support for the people that are actually making the content for the game. So as people are pushing and trying new things and making new content, problems arise, they think of a better way that they might want to do something. So while you have a plan for a design and you're executing towards it, probably the majority of your work actually during that time is supporting the team, dealing with changes that come up, dealing with problems that they have, all that kind of stuff. So 2 to 3 years is pretty normal. Sports games can be shorter, they're trying to get one out every year. But most of the Dead Space games, I think, are made in about 2 years.
Hi, I'm Brandon from Indiana. I was wondering, what are some good colleges to go to if you're interested in the game field?
So really, like I was trying to get at there, you kind of just want to go to the best school that you want to. Ultimately, I don't know exactly. Different companies kind of may at times have certain special relationships with certain colleges. So I happen to know from EA that we see a lot of people. I'm not sure the exact detail, but we were somehow involved with a program at USC that was an actual game program, and there were some people from EA that were involved in making it, so you see a lot of people from there. We have internship programs. It almost seems somewhat random with what schools you end up with they are, and when you pick a very company, the University of Illinois or Champaign has always been a big one for us. Various other ones as well. I mean, it's somewhat random. I think the main thing is you really want a place that has a strong technical background. If you're looking to get into the engineering and technical side of it, you're looking to look for the best engineering school you can get into. So if you go and look at rankings schools, they have rankings by discipline, rankings by engineering. you kind of just want to go to the best tool you can get and not worry too much about the specifics of is it good for games or not. Really, most game people, we're looking for a solid background in computer science and math and physics and all that kind of stuff. If you love games and you're playing games and you're making games in your spare time, if you're at school and you have a strong education from a good school, that's the best way.
I'm a big early start from Oklahoma, and so you guys make the games, right?
Not me personally, but EA did, yeah.
Okay, what, I don't know if what you can answer or not, but where did their language come from?
That's a good question. Unfortunately, I can't answer it. I have no idea. But if you're super curious, you can come up and ask me afterwards. I'll give you an email address. I can find out for you. But I would imagine somebody on the team came up with it. It serves some nice goals. One of the big things that you have to do in games is localize it to all the territories where you want to sell it. You know, if you're going to have our game in Germany, the people all speak German. But since don't have to do that. So I don't know whether that was part of the idea behind it, but
I'm Derek from California, and I was wondering, do you have any recommendations for the people that are starting game programming and your boss or easily?
well, programming can be tough. I think the best thing, and the way that I started, was find a way to do something that puts a result on the screen quickly, right? It's always better, like I started out way back in the day, our computers, old computers with BASIC, and I can remember one of the first programs that I wrote was something that's made fireworks appear on the screen. Just because it was something that without a whole lot of programming, I could get a lot of visual feedback quickly. It puts it into a way that you can understand it more. If I'm changing this number, it changes the size of the firework, or the size of the circle, or whatever. So if you're sitting there just looking at text and trying to do who knows what, it's good to get visual. It's tough now because it was very simple back when I did it. In terms of you could just say draw a circle, and there was a circle on the screen. Now you're dealing with whether it's DirectX or all these kinds of ways that are like, how big is my window and what is the window title and all this kind of stuff. There's a lot of work you have to do to get to the point that you can see a picture. But Java's good. There's a lot of ways with Java that you can kind of quickly get to the point that you have a canvas that you run circles on, things like that. If you're getting into C++, something like OpenGL has a very simple way. Similarly, putting a window on the screen and drawing. It's good to find an example, like if you say that you want to, I don't know, draw a cube or something, you can search for that in Google, and you will probably find a program that somebody else has written that does exactly that. If you search for cube OpenGL or something, you will probably get back a program that you can then tweak and modify yourself, and so you don't have to build up some of that scaffolding and get it running. You can actually start saying like, well, what if I made a cube spin? How do I do that? So, way in the back. What will you next?
I'm Nathaniel from California.
Yeah.
Does this game get any inspiration from K-Dog's? No,
Payday. No, not really. I mean, certainly they're obviously pretty similar, but this really, it's maybe not so easy to see from the videos, but this really is much more like Battlefield. The real inspiration for this is Battlefield, but in an urban setting with cops and criminals. It plays like Battlefield. It has good game modes like Battlefield. We've added our own new modes and things like that, but we've added our own gadgets and the things you saw, kind of like tasers and zip lines and all that kind of stuff. But really, it's at its core, it's a Battlefield game. And the cops and criminal stuff is more about setting. Really for us.
I'm Naomi from Illinois. I was wondering what programming languages are most commonly used for PC games?
C++ is really the answer for almost everything for games these days. It is true now that a lot of people use Unity and things like that. If you've heard of Unity, which it itself is probably written in C++, but it provides a way for you to make a game with JavaScript. So you do see a number of Unity games out there now, but anything that you see that is a big, major kind of product is probably C++. C++ is really the main way in, and I would definitely start with that. Java, a little bit, not that much, and Facebook games and things are action script and stuff, but it's really C++.
I'm Will from Arkansas. To your knowledge, is EA Sports making a college football game this year?
I have no idea, actually. So I can't tell
I
you.
just heard rumors about it.
Yeah, I haven't followed that, so unfortunately I don't know.
I was wondering, I had two, like, a few questions.
Hopefully I can remember.
How often are game proposals, like beta games, denied, like once you actually test them? And how do you know they're ready? And,
Okay, we'll start with those. So, it's actually an interesting question. One of the things that EA is very good at is making games for a very long time. So one of the things that EA is good at is managing that process. So, it's actually pretty rare for a game to get canceled at EA. They have a long series of stages that a game idea goes through before it actually becomes a game. And an idea may be rejected or accepted, but by the time you're actually getting to the point of making a beta, they have a long series of gates that you have to go through that will try to prevent you from even making a beta unless it will succeed. So I don't know broadly about the industry, but for us, most things succeed, but there is a big process. So somebody can have an idea and a team will go into a phase where they sort of prototype the idea, not as far as a beta, but really something very rough, and maybe with a lot of hand-drawn pictures and documents and things like that, rather than actual software. And they'll show that to somebody, that'll go through review, it may be accepted, rejected, it'll go on, they'll start making a small piece of the game. Eventually they'll make sort of what we call a vertical slice, which is a small piece of the game, but kind of realized as something approximating some chip quality level. People look at that and decide whether, so it's actually a whole bunch of small checks along the way. As for how do you know when it's ready to go, that's an interesting question too. Again, that's something that EA is pretty good at. They've been around for a long time and have watched the way a lot of games finish. So they have metrics about how many bugs there are, the rate at which bugs are being found, the rate at which bugs are being fixed, all these kinds of things that they can kind of look at and have a pretty good idea of where a product is. Some of it you can just see with your eyes, right? You can look at it and say, well, this doesn't look finished. But they also have a good way of tracking closing out products so that they have a good idea when it's going to be finished. Ultimately, though, it's more of an art than a science to some degree. You can always make the game better, and you would always like to make the game better. And sometimes you have to ship it because the company needs the money and it was signed up for that day. Sometimes you can get extra time. So there's a lot of factors.
Hello, my name is Spencer. I'm from Shanghai, China. I have two questions. First, what will the game, which engine will the game use?
Frostbite. Yep.
Third generation or second generation?
I believe it is actually on Frostbite 3.
Okay. And I have noticed that the previous Battlefield games has been transplanted to the mobile platform, actually iOS. But it's not really successful. It was not actually. So you stopped it. And so what's your point or what's your opinion towards the mobile platform, such as iOS?
Yeah. Okay. So I don't know about, there's some things that are what are my personal opinion and what is EA's opinion. In terms of what are my personal opinions, for me personally, one of the big challenges, if you're taking a game like Battlefield, you're trying to make it on a tablet or on your phone, how you control it is quite an issue. So, personally, for me, I haven't seen a lot of games that have really conquered that in the same way that a mouse and a keyboard or a joypad does. I would be interested in it. I think the way things are looking right now, and the way we're broadly looking at it, we haven't ruled out doing anything on those kind of platforms. We look at it a lot now as a companion experience to the actual game on a PC or on a console, so that somebody might have their tablet there next to them and have a way to basically have a map up all the time without having to go to a map screen or something, by having a connected tablet app that shows the map. But in terms of actually playing the full board game, that's really something that we're still working on. I don't think I could say that we have an answer yet for how to deliver that in quality that we are completely accurate.
My third and the last question is, I believe it's a competitor, the Call of Duty.
Yep.
What's your opinion about it?
What's my opinion about Call of Duty? I like it. A lot of my friends work on it. So, well, that actually brings up an interesting point. The industry is very small. That's one thing. It's a big industry, but particularly within engineering, there aren't that many companies, right? There's Activision and EA and Ubisoft and a few. So after a while, when you've been doing it for a while, you know people that go everywhere. A lot of my friends work on the newest Call of Duty, so I like it. I like Battlefield too. I like lots of games. I think they each have their strengths.
I'm Dean, I'm from Nevada. So I was wondering, like, when you talk about like design and how like things can change, like how do you deal with like balancing a game?
So that's actually an interesting one. I'm not heavily involved in that myself personally, but there's a lot of things that go on with that. I can give you some examples of some of the things we do for our game. We actually play our game every day. So we have a play test every afternoon where all the people in the team play, and there's a survey at the end of it, and people write feedback. And so you might, if somebody determines that the sniper rifle feels like it's cheap or something, they're going to put feedback in there, and our designers collect all the feedback and look at it, and then based on that kind of subjective feedback, they will then go back and look at the numbers. Ultimately, one of the design jobs is managing all of that, tuning all of that. In some cases, there's math behind it in terms of how progression of power should be. So one answer is math. Math is your friend when it comes to doing things like that. If you have an equation or a formula that says how things should grow, then there's a lot less room for error. A lot of it's just trial and error though, and a human looking at it and balancing it. We do focus tests. In addition to the tests that our team play, we'll have people, game players from around the world come in and play the game, get their feedback on it. We did a bunch of things with our game where we brought in pro players to Battlefield, have them play our game early when we still had time to react to their feedback. If they think something's cheap or too powerful or whatever, we can react to it. But again, that's an art really too, more than a science in some case. You apply some science to it, but you need some smart people who understand all of it, know all of it, and then can look at people's feedback and sort of work into how things need to be adjusted.
I have one more question.
Yeah.
How do you view esports with like, when you mentioned
Yep.
pro players, like how do you view esports as like you as a company or your personal opinion?
Well, I'm interested in it. As a person, I watch it. So I was always a big fan of StarCraft 2, so I watch professional StarCraft 2. I think it's good. As a company, we certainly support it. We have esports features in our game, certainly, spectator rooms, things like that can be used for tournaments. We view it's actually an interesting question. So those people are experts, and they have a lot of valuable opinions about your product. And somebody that devotes their life to playing your game professionally knows more about it than you do. And so we sort of have to respect that fact that they're that into it. At the same time, we also have to balance that they don't necessarily represent a typical customer. So you could make a game that a pro gamer wants to play, and it might be a game that only a pro gamer wants to play, and then we couldn't sell it. So you have to find a balance. But generally, I would say we respect their opinion, we involve them directly in it, we realize that in a lot of cases they know the game so well that they do better than some of us. And I'm a fan of watching.
Alice from New Zealand, where do we sign up to be a beta tester?
So things like that, it kind of varies. Unfortunately, there's not like a nice unified way that that's handled. For our game, there was just a website. So at E3, they announced that they were going to have a beta program for our game. And when they announced it, they announced the website that you would go to and sign up. But it's kind of one-off, and if you're not really plugged into sort of the general news of things, you might miss it. Unfortunately, I don't have a really better answer than that. The best way, if you're really into it, is follow game news, watch, read gaming websites, things like that. If you look at some of the popular gaming websites that have news on them, they'll have announcements of what betas are coming, if they're coming, how you sign up for them. Some companies, like I know as a player, Blizzard, with all of their games, part of your account management, you can actually pick and choose what betas you wish to opt into. We don't have anything like that that I'm aware of right now as a broad thing. But really, I think you just, unfortunately, you kind of have to follow the news and look for whatever the one-off rule is for signing up.
I'm Jacob from West Virginia, and I was wondering, with the publishers and developers, how exactly does the relationship work out? Like, I know the developer does more of the programming and writing of the game, and the publisher is more like PR or whatever.
Yeah.
Marketing.
Yep.
Yeah.
So EA is a little different in that regard. EA is both a publisher and a developer, right? So in some ways that distinction is almost blurring a little bit now too. In the past, it was kind of more clear cut. Developer made the software, a publisher made the physical thing that you bought in the store and played, right? So a publisher would be the one that made the boxes, that did the marketing, that shipped it to the store, that had the warehouse that had the games in it, did the sales, all that kind of stuff. But with digital distribution now, it's a little more gray area on some of that kind of stuff. For us, it kind of goes back to the slides that I put there, where the dev team proper is kind of the artists, the engineers, the designers, and the management, the people that make the software. You could say that a publisher is kind of all the other stuff. The definition of that, all the other stuff, though, is changing now to where it's not quite what it used to be. Certainly marketing, certainly PR, those are still huge. But there's kind of more to it too. Like EA has something called Origin, which is sort of like our version of Steam, Origin, the first party friend achievement environments, all that kind of thing. So in some ways that thing is the thing that EA provides to us as a publisher that we use. We don't just write code for Origin, but for the PC version we use it, have a friend who's through and all that kind of stuff. So I sort of think of it as everything that's not the game, but the industry's definitely changing. It was, when I started, when I had my own company, we were a distinct company that was a distinct entity, and Sony published our game for us. So we had a very specific relationship with them, where they made us milestone maintenance, and we had to deliver milestones to them to get paid and all this kind of stuff. It's a little bit blurrier now. There probably are still places that are running in that arrangement, but it's less so than previously.
Hi, I'm from Maine, and also before was situated by facilities by crashes and stuff. How is that
Yep, so they've been working on it a lot. I don't know if you follow the press. So they are still working on it. They've put improvements in. We are sort of close enough in our code to them that we take all of the fixes that they make. So the changes that they've done recently with the servers and updating the refresh rate to try to deal with rogue banning, all that kind of stuff. We've taken those changes. We actually helped with some of them. And we've done a whole bunch beyond that. The good news is too, one of the reasons that we have our ship date moved out is to make sure that we have as much time as we need to kind of deal with issues. So really there's no real great answer other than kind of hard work is how we put our dealing with it. We're working through, they're still working on it, we're working on it. That's about it.
I'm Henry from California. Do you know anything about Star Wars Battlefront 3?
Not a lot. I don't think anything that I'm allowed to talk about. So, yeah, I can't answer. Yeah.
How did the step from the last gen of PS3 and Xbox 360 to Xbox One and PS4 affect the servers of the Discord?
It doesn't really that much actually. We kind of have the same kind of back end to everything. The games became more sophisticated, so certainly when you have more expensive features in your game, you need more expensive servers to power those games. For a game like Battlefield that has dedicated servers, our spec for a machine has gone up, so in one way it affected if we bought new ones. But generally, a lot of the things in terms of things like achievements and you're managing your accounts and all that, there's not really a lot of difference between us and the current gen. It's similar, despite whatever, we're always upgrading.
I'm Matt from Delaware, and I was wondering, how do you guys differentiate between alpha and beta testing publicly? Because you see companies like Blizzard will release a game in technical alpha, and it'll be more polished than some games that other companies release in beta. And I was wondering how specifically at EA that was handled.
So for us, I think, so first off, generally, you notice something that I think is generally true. It's a question even for us. What alpha is, what beta is. People just kind of use those words to mean whatever they want them to mean for the most part. Internally, we kind of think of it as alpha is the first time that you could play the game from beginning to end. There will still be bugs, there may be pieces that aren't fully realized, some of it might just be a white box, but we think of alpha as all the mechanics that you need to play the game are in, and there's no, level 4 isn't here yet. It's at least there in some form. Beta, for us internally, we kind of have a different internal definition than we do for things that we set out. For us internally, beta, the game is basically the point. The game is done, but there might still be bugs, is basically what we would call beta. So there's no missing piece that should be there. There's no white box area. If you can snap your fingers and fix all the bugs, the product should be ready to give when it's beta. Now that's a little different than the beta that we just released for our game. That's kind of our internal definition of beta. The beta that we released to customers, obviously that one, the game wasn't finished at all, and lots of the game still wasn't made at that point. So that's not really beta the same way. Whether we call what we showed at alpha or a beta, you could have an argument about. And I don't know. We call it a beta just because we thought that it was finished enough that it felt like a game. A lot of times when people call something an alpha, they're trying to give you an expectation that this isn't what the game's going to look like when it's finished. So for us, it's more or less, we're going to make it prettier and faster and all that, but it's more or less what the game is going to be. But it's a gray area. There's no hard and fast answer.
I'm Keith from Mississippi. I was just wondering, I've heard constantly that engineering is a field where you're constantly learning. There's something new coming out and you're having to go to workshops. I'm wondering how true that is for the gaming industry, how often you see sort of new systems or technologies come into the field that you need to send employees out on workshops to learn about.
So the most obvious one in the games world is the time the new consoles come. So anytime, over the years, there have been some big jumps when we went from 2D to 3D to, one of the big jumps that we did this time was going, actually it started last time, really, multiprocessor like I was talking about previously. Workshops per se is actually maybe not quite as much. People do go to SIGGRAPH and things like that to learn how the state of the art is in rendering and stuff like that. But really a lot of it's more on-the-job training. When you used to have a PS3 and now you have a PS4 on your desk, well, it's time to learn how to use it. So EA does internally have a EA University program, so EA does some of that teaching internally as well. So during my time there, I've been through courses that were actually, EA's so big that they can kind of do it themselves, so you don't go outside necessarily so much. But really the big new learning is new consoles. So that comes about every 5 years.
Hey, I'm Ernesto from Mexico. And I was wondering, during the time you have been developing games, have you observed any differences between what modern gamers are looking for compared to gamers 5 years ago?
Well, that's a tough question. I think for the most part, good games are still what people want. There have been some trends and things that have come over the past decade in terms of MMOs, and another big thing is like Uncharted and movie-style games, kind of sort of like the Dead Space games that we made. You know, MOBAs are huge now. Mobile gaming is bigger. I don't really know about a trend per se. The thing that people have new ideas and new things come and go, but I think quality is what continues. If you look at the great games, you look at something like League of Legends, yeah, it's a new kind of game, but it's a great game. And it's successful because it's a great game. And the same is true for an MMO or Uncharted or any of these titles. So I personally haven't noticed a huge difference. I'm not a designer, so there are perhaps other people that would be more attuned to answering that now. I think a lot of the classic things have stayed popular. Shooters are still huge, as there's not a ton of difference between this Battlefield game and the Battlefield game that came out in the year 2001, other than a lot fancier graphics and a lot more stuff happening. The core idea of the games or things.
Good. Time for one more.
All right.
Hi, I'm Jake from Pennsylvania, and I have 2 questions. One, what was the song that was used in the single-player trailer? And 2, what made you guys want to switch from military to cops versus robbers?
So, the first one, unfortunately, I don't know. If you're really interested, do you know?
Yeah, except for the jungle or Mexican Western.
Thank you. There you go. And what was your second question again?
What made you guys want to switch from military to...
So, as I mentioned up there, this is the first Battlefield game that wasn't made in DICE. So, exclusively, they're involved too. But, so, our game was really born a couple of years ago when the head of our studio, we've been making Dead Space games for a long time, met with the head of their studio, and they were just kind of talking about like, hey, how could we work together? And the idea had kind of been floating around inside EA for a while, and they just thought it would be a good thing that we could kind of pick up and run with. So it wasn't really, I think, such a focused decision as it was. There were a number of people around the company that for a while thought that it would be cool to kind of take things in a slightly different direction. And then when our leaders and their leaders were just, I almost got the impression it was like sort of a semi-accidental meeting that they were talking about it. They thought that with our background, particularly in sort of the more story-based kind of games and the expertise that we had in sort of creating different fictions and environments and things like that, that we would be good people to kind of be the ones to try taking it in a different direction that was different than what people were expecting. All right.
Well,